Welcome everybody. My name is Annie Burke and I'm here today for a 30 minutes together conversation about resilience and community. And I'm really excited for this conversation. It's a really important one to be having during this COVID crisis and the economic crisis that we're starting to face. I'm really honored to have today's guest with us to speak and really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you all for making the time to listen or to watch, depending on if you're listening, watching live, or if you're listening, watching later. Really glad that you're tuning in to this topic and to this conversation. This is a conversation part of an organization that I am lucky to be a part of called Together Bay Area. We're a regional coalition working together for lands, people, and community. We have 56 member organizations that are nonprofits, public agencies, indigenous tribes in the 9 counties of the Bay Area plus Santa Cruz. And we were formerly known as the Bay Area Open Space Council and have recently renamed, repositioned, done a lot of reimagining to become Together Bay Area. And really glad to be stepping up in this time of the COVID crisis to connect, convene, and catalyze action. We would be doing this in person. That's what we've been doing for a long time. That was my role at the Bay Area Open Space Council for many years. And as we were just saying, really fortunate in a strange kind of way for Zoom to be able to have these conversations and reach, in some ways, many more people, because it's much easier to turn on a Zoom than to drive in the Bay Area. So I welcome you and really look forward to getting into a conversation around inclusive community and resilience from people to people who I'm just honored to be with. Before I introduce them though, I wanna do a little bit of housekeeping. Well, actually before I do housekeeping, I wanna do something much more important. And that is acknowledge that we, while we're not in the same room, in the same space, we in the Bay Area are on indigenous land, and that that this place that we're in, the Bay Area, has been indigenous land for 10,000 plus years. That we acknowledge for 10,000 years or more that the people living here lived in harmony with the land. We honor the work and the connection that they have with this place. And we understand the impact of colonization, first by the Spanish and then by the Americans. And we are humbled to be doing work in this place, living here, and working to connect land, people, and community. So I just want to acknowledge where we are today. This place called the Bay Area now, but has been home to, and is home to indigenous people around the region. And just want to know that that work is happening here and now. And we're going to be talking about some of that work, some of that living and culture and breathing together that's happening right now. So I want to acknowledge that. I also want to do a little bit of housekeeping. These conversations that we're holding, this is the second in a series, are short. And we only have half an hour, it's 30 minutes. And we're going to talk about some big stuff. And that we're intentionally doing that because one, we want to make sure that we have these conversations in this moment. And it's easier to find 30 minutes than it is to find an hour or 90 minutes. But because of that, we're not going to open it up to Q&A or questions because we have so much that we want to get to in a short amount of time. That doesn't mean that we don't, that doesn't mean that we want to stop conversations or questions or inquiry. It just means that we want to maximize our time together here. And I welcome conversation offline. I welcome the opportunity to connect all of you to others who may be interested in ongoing kinds of conversations. So this, while we're not going to do Q&A today in the next 30 minutes, we really want to encourage dialogue. And so we will find other ways to do that. So our agenda is really to jump in and get into conversation. And so with that, I want to introduce our guests today. They are Vincent Medina, who's a member of the Aloni tribe, and Trevino, who's a member of the Rumsen Aloni tribe. And they have co-founded Cafe Aloni. And actually, the introduction of you two would be could be like an hour long of all the things that you're involved in, all the things that you do, how you show up in so many different communities and in so many different ways. I've been a fan from a distance of and so impressed by both of your work and how you show up. And so it's a real honor to be in conversation with you today. So let's just start with that, with a small question that feels really big right now. How are you?
Thank you for asking that. We are both doing our very best to make sense of this time that we're living in, and also doing what we can to be able to keep our culture moving forward, keep our culture safe. I'd like to start by saying to all of you, Horshetuhi Makam, Kanakrakat Vincent Medina, Aya Kanamu Ekmaknana Rakatsu Trevino, Aya Makin Aloni Taraima. Nesa makrote halkin ware maniak suyak ma isha hementuhi, Aya manimak muek ma isha netuhi aye. In Chochenyo, which is the first language that's ever been spoken here in the East Bay, and the language that's still spoken by my family and my tribe today. I said hello to you all, Horshetuhi. My name is Vincent Medina, and in that beautiful introduction, thank you, Annie, for opening this up in such a kind way. I am a member of Moekma, and my family has lived here in the East Bay forever, with no disconnect, and will be here in the future as well. I acknowledge my partner, Louis Trevino, is with me as well, and he'll be joining in this conversation. And Louis is Rumson Aloni from Carmel Valley. And together, Louis and myself, we work to keep our foods and our cultures moving forward, along with our community, led by our elders and their guidance. I said that right now we're in a place called Halkin Irhin, which is right along San Lorenzo, San Leandro Creek. And it's an area that my ancestors have always lived in, long before colonization, long before the missions, and because of the strength of our family, where we continue to live and thrive, and where we've never left. It means a lot to be able to be here right now, and to know that this land has always protected my community, to know that this land is still protecting us even to this day. So to answer your question, Annie, we're doing okay. We're taking care right now of our community. We're finding ways to be able to make culture accessible and to be able to adapt to this time that we're in. We're right now not at Cafe Aloni, which of course is it's very difficult because we love that place so much, and we know how effective that place is to be able to provide space for our community. We're also educating the public about how enduring our culture is. And it makes us, feel a little bit sad to not be there doing that work. But we know that this work, it's going to continue in any way possible. And right now, it's continuing, as we're speaking right now. It's nice to be able to share some of our story with all of you who are joining the public. And we really appreciate you taking your time to join this conversation as well, to be able to listen to some of our story and learn about who we are as the first people of this place.
Thank you. For those who have the visuals and aren't just listening, can you tell us what's behind you?
Definitely. We've been missing our tabletop over at Cafe Aloni, so we placed behind us an image of what's called in Chochenyo Shetnen. In Rumsen, how do you call it, Louis?
We call it Pulum.
Pulum. Our Aloni languages, Rumsen and Chochenyo, they're different, but they're also related in many ways as well. But acorn bread is what that translates to. And that's our oldest, most traditional food. The acorn bread that's in this image right here, that is tan oak acorn bread. And it's a traditional comfort food in our community. And even though acorns are gathered in the fall by our people, traditionally they would be gathered at the bare minimum for 3 years. And many Aloni people still do that. We keep granaries in our backyards, and modern day granaries often. In the old days, they'd be like these beautiful upside down stilts, baskets on stilts that were upside down, that are covered in California grapevine and tule and willow. Today, we use modern day ones made out of metal often, but these granaries still do the trick, and they let us keep acorn on our tables throughout the year. And throughout this difficult time we're in, we're all going to comfort foods right now often, and for us, acorn bread is definitely one of those old comfort foods that sustained our people for too many generations to ever count.
Thank you. I have to admit that they're making me hungry for lunch.
They're really good. Let me just quickly just tell you, the outside is like a nice crust, and the inside you bite into it, and it's soft and sweet and gelatinous, and all of that sweet acorn that's naturally sweet condenses, and the sweetness only amplifies and gets sweeter and sweeter, just all based on the natural acorn. And we usually will cook a little bit of bay into that we gather into the acorn, so like that peppery flavor comes out. We like to have it with our coffee in the morning. And it's such a wonderful food to have, so full of protein and that old taste of our ancestors that we know they love.
Okay, so now I'm hungry. And also it reminds me of coming to Cafe Aloni in the fall when you were still able to be open. And at Cafe, it's, for those who don't know, it's located in the city of Berkeley in Aloni territory on the south side of UC Berkeley campus. And you've created this most beautiful, I mean, really beautiful space and place with ritual and ceremony, delicious food, delicious drinks, careful, placing of setting of a table, flowers, decorations. It's warm. I walked in and felt like I was welcome there, and I felt like something special was happening there, even though it was my first time, and I didn't feel connected necessarily before I walked in, but within seconds of being there, I felt connected. And one, I really look forward to physically returning to that space, and I know that you do too. I'd love to hear you talk about how you create that space, and specifically around inclusive community. So it's not just community where you know who's in and who's out, but how do you create community in a way that people, a non-native person like me, or somebody who's not necessarily a part of the group, can feel welcome? What are your thoughts about that, and how do you set up yourselves up to do that intentionally?
Well, we appreciate you asking that question, and I'll start. And Louis, at any point, feel free just to jump in, because I know you have a lot to share on this as well. So for those who are unfamiliar with Cafe Aloni, this is the very first Aloni restaurant in modern times in the entire world. And we say modern times because we don't want to discount, what might have happened 2,000 years ago. We don't know, but at least in contemporary times, this is the very first Aloni restaurant. And when we say Aloni restaurant, we mean it's unabashedly Aloni in every way possible. Our menu, it's entirely pre-contact ingredients. They're made with ingredients that we gather here in the East Bay after negotiating permits with East Bay Parks based on our ancestral relationships with these places. We have our basketry, our aesthetics, our cultural arts, on display, photos of our family. Our menus are in Chochenyo language, and Aloni people are also staffing this place as well. So it's a very Aloni space, and we wanted a space that was fully Aloni, unabashedly Aloni, in how we are able to be able to have our food served, how we are able to have our aesthetic, even having our language be prominent throughout the restaurants. We did this on purpose because we wanted to be able to provide a space where we could be able to show how beautiful our culture is, how meaningful our culture is, and how valuable it is. Growing up right here in the East Bay, where my family has always lived, there was always feelings of isolation that were here, even though I'm right in my home. When we would go out of our homes into the public, well, we would often, feel there would be feelings of invisibility all around here in the East Bay, in this place that our family has never left, have consistently lived, in this place that shaped our identity and our culture, our language, and our religion. To know that there wasn't any reminders that we are still around. And if there were reminders, they were usually very minimalistic. in past tense and sort of alluded to the fact that we were once here, but really, and when those reminders, basically it would imply that we weren't here anymore. Growing up, I would see my family at home, how strong they were, how much they love our culture, how they did everything possible to keep our culture strong and moving forward. My great-grandmother, Mary Archuleta, she was one of those people. She was born on the old Pleasanton Rancheria over in 1910. That Pleasanton Rancheria was a sovereign piece of Aloni land that our tribe lived on when our tribe had federal recognition up until 1927. On that Pleasanton Rancheria, our family was able to live there in safety. And my great-grandmother, she lived there and she worked her entire life to keep our culture strong based on all that she learned from her elders and her family, her mother, and that goes all the way back into the ancients. Now at home, we see that value, we see that care, that love, and we got to meet those old timers growing up who spoke our language, who gathered these foods. We see how much they love these ways. Now, if you could imagine having so much love for culture, having so much love for this land that's given so much birth and shaped our identity, and not being able to see any reminders out there, it can be really sad. And oftentimes I would feel very invisible here in my home growing up. But I also know that there's ways to change that too, that we don't have to stay locked into that. And my family has consistently, ever since colonization has come here, has reminded the public that we're here as Aloni people. That's how you see things like Aloni College. That's how you see things like the Aloni Greenway and Aloni Park and murals in Berkeley, and how you're able to see our tribe consistently work for recognition and reaffirmation of our federal status. What we're doing, it's not new, but it's been happening consistently ever since colonization came here. We're just doing what we can to follow in the footsteps of those before us, to make the road easier for the generations that are coming, but also to make sure that the sacrifices of those before us were never in vain, like our great-grandparents, like my great-grandmother Mary. Because of that, we have obligations to make sure that this first Loney restaurant, it's something that's going to be sustainable, and it's something that's going to be reflecting our values at home. Something that many people know about Aloni people, even if you just read this, about in school, as it's no secret that Aloni people are generous, that we're generous people, and that we like to feed people, that we like to be able to show kindness. That's part of our values, is being able to be generous, being able, if somebody's thirsty, to provide something to drink, if somebody's hungry, to provide food. And obviously early in colonization, that was something that Aloni people did, and that was taken advantage of heavily by those who were trying to colonize our ancestors. And then those same people who took advantage of that later enslaved our ancestors into the missions, and then later issued genocide against us during the gold rush period here in California when Americans came in. So that generosity was taken advantage of as well. But also, when there's a value that's there, while we learn from those mistakes, generosity, it's something that predates colonization, and it's something that will, when we're living in a totally post-colonial era, will still be part of our culture as well. Treating people well, showing decency, showing kindness, showing full-heartedness, love, and doing things the way that our family has always showed us, which is with respect. Because that respect, it's more than just for the people that we're giving something to. That's showing the respect that we have inherently and that we're raised with and that we hold in ourselves as well. That respect is something, and that dignity is something that's never been lost in spite of all of the challenges that we faced in our history. Our family always teaches us to treat people well if they show you, that they have a good heart, to make sure that, you feed people, to make sure that even if somebody asks for something a little bit, if they ask for more food, that you provide it to them if you can. At Cafe Aloni, we want to show those values that we have at home. And also we want to be able to build alliances and not have to push people away. The truth is that we're living in a radically different world today in 2020 than our ancestors were 240 years ago before colonization. But there's also been an immense amount that hasn't changed as well in that process. We can't be naive and not acknowledge the fact that things have changed. Some things have changed also, such as having a massive population in the Bay Area of over 7 million people. Now, realistically, the way that we can be able to create sustainable change, in our view, is to be unabashed of our values, to stick to what we have, consistently work to reclaim what we've lost through colonization, things that went to sleep, be able to see those things reawakened again, practiced in our world for a second time, and then to be able to build alliances so that we can have allies working with our community instead of pushing people away. Having people reinforce that Aloni people are here, even if they're not standing with Aloni people next to them, to remind people that our culture is living. Nudging people in the right direction if they hear that Aloni people, if they hear somebody might voice something like Aloni people spoke Chochenyo or Rumsen language in the past, instead of saying that we speak it today, saying that Aloni people used to live here, instead of saying the truth, which is that Aloni people still do live here. Those little bits of misinformation that are echoed by the public, if they're not checked, what they can do is reinforce that Aloni people aren't here anymore. And then when the public doesn't interact with Aloni people and they don't think that we're here, for many people, that gives them some kind of artificial legitimacy to do things that they shouldn't be doing, such as developing on sacred sites, desecrating shell mounds where we still pray to, such as fracking on mountains that we still revere to be sacred, even to this day. Those things, in our view, shouldn't be happening. But by having these conversations and educating people of how we're here, how beautiful, valuable, meaningful our culture is, we could be able to build alliances of people who will be there on our side, even when we're not there. So this work, there's two goals. Part of it is the way that our families taught us, with generosity, treat people with love and kindness. They ask for more food, give them more food. If they want, some extra to drink, give them some extra. Show that, because that's how our grandparents teach us. That's how our parents teach us, our great-grandparents teach us. But then also the other part of that is by building these alliances, it's going to work. Also for Aloni people, and finding ways to be able to have sustainable coalitions of people that are going to work to advance Aloni culture that's led by Aloni leadership. And that's something that we want to be able to see happen, that we're seeing happen right now, that we know will grow stronger into the future as well.
Thank you. Louis, is there anything you would like to add?
I guess just that all of those principles and those values that Vince was just sharing, that we learned from our great-grandparents, from our grandparents, and from our parents, those things that are continuous, they go back into that ancient time. And when we bring Cafe Aloni together every time that we're there, when we prepare the individual dishes that come together, when we set our communal table, when we set out our baskets and our other artwork and our traditional games, when we bring out the food and have it on the counter so that everyone can see everything together, all of those things are done with the intention of bringing all of those principles and those values to the table also. And so just as Vince was sharing, when people come, we show that generosity and that kindness and that welcoming. And as we're preparing the food and we set the table, we also have in mind those people who taught us those values. So you set a table such that if one of our grandmothers was to come that day, that it would be as beautiful and welcoming and warm as we would want it for them. And so that's something that we carry with us every time that we set up.
Yes, well said.
Everything you've said is resonating for me personally on a very tactical level of how am I going to set my table tonight with my family of four, but also metaphorically or symbolically of like, and thinking at different scales, how do we change who's at the table? How do we welcome new people to the proverbial table or the literal table to change the conversation and welcome people in to show that generosity? It's both literal and figurative, I guess, is what is resonating for me. And I want to build on all of that to talk about resilience. We only have a few more minutes. I know this is 30 minutes is really quick. So just briefly, if you could just talk about how does what you've just talked about in terms of what you've done at the cafe and how you show up there, how does that translate to dealing with adversity that we're all facing now?
Well, it's no secret that we are no strangers in our history to dealing with hard times. We've had many unfair, tragic experiences in our collective history as Aloni people that consistently our family has survived through. And one of the things that gives us a lot of comfort in this time that we're in is that we know through difficult times that there's always a way to get through them. And there's always hope that tomorrow will be brighter. We think often about, in our history, about how diseases throughout colonization, when they were either weaponized or when they came during the mission times, or when they came through more national pandemics that affected the entire nation, like during the Spanish flu, about how during those times our family undoubtedly did go through hardships and many people perished without a doubt. One of the things that we think about as well, though, is the social safety net that sprang into action during that time, and how there's stories of consistently of how people looked after one another, did what they could to provide for one another, did what they could to keep one another safe, feed one another, provide safety, how people went together to stay away from the epidemics when epidemics were coming to population centers and went into more isolated areas. And as we listen to old family stories that have been passed on through generations, and as we go through our old archives that our family has recorded in the 1920s and 1930s, we consistently see ways that our family has responded, and they responded in ways that have been successful to keep our community safe today. And I'd like to say to the public, who are here with us, is that, well, this time might be a challenging one right now. Without it's not a might, it is a challenging one. There's no question about it. We also hold the hope, and we encourage all of you that a better day is ahead of us, and to be able to think of what could come out of this time in a way that's transformative, that's beneficial to be able to fix some of what was broken already in our society, to be able to provide more for those who need the most, to be able to work to correct old mistakes, be able to work for justice for all people. And out of this time of flux and transition and change, something beautiful and transformative can also come out of this as well. And that's what we'd like to see happen. We know that we're going to be okay. Our ancestors teach us, and we know that they're with us every day.
Thank you for that. Where can people learn more about Cafe Aloni and the other things that you do and ways that you show up today?
Well, you can learn more about us at cafealoni.com. We run an organization called Makamham, and that's spelled Makamham. That means our food in Trevino. That's the nonprofit organization that we run that's focused entirely on providing community work for our people, as well as cultural work, language classes, cooking classes, gathering trips, and formal dinners for our elders. Makamham, it's the umbrella organization that Cafe Aloni is a part of. And we encourage you to look for us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter at Makamham, on Instagram at Makamham, and feel free to follow us. We're always posting photos of food, stories, family history, and we want people to know how beautiful our culture is and how valuable our culture is as well. In Trevino language, we say Makin iriti arship. We are so grateful that you can all tahi makin, that you could all listen to us, and we hope that you all stay safe and well. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much for spending 30 minutes with us, for sharing your story, for doing the work that you do, and showing up in this life in the way that you do. I know sometimes it's work and sometimes it's not work. It's just how we show up. And I really, I'm really grateful to everything you do and who you are. And I really honored to have you here today. Thank you. To everybody who's listening, I invite you to follow Vincent's advice and to follow them online, to sign up for their e-newsletter, which I read from top to bottom every single time it arrives, and see what we can do to transform. Take this moment, take this opportunity to transform our world.
And also,
it's really an opportunity. Yeah.
Say one last thing to whoever's on, and this is also something that we share at Cafe Aloni, and this is something that we could share with you all as well. And just to end this conversation, if it's just 2 minutes, if that's okay with you,
Sure.
is we'd like to tell people that we are seeing, in spite of whatever challenges have happened in our history, that we are seeing concrete change happen right now, positive changes that are taking us to new places. But we also ask all of you that if you ever hear any of those misconceptions, misinformation about our community, please let them know that Aloni people are here. Please let them know that our culture, it's still practiced. And please let them know that Aloni people will be here in the future as well. We believe that when the public knows that, they're more likely to stand with us as our allies, building alliances, and working for a brighter future where Aloni people are able to be visible and be able to be leaders right here in our homeland where we've always lived. Thank you all very much for your time, for listening with open hearts and open ears. And once again, stay safe during this time. And once this is over, please do come and visit us at Cafe Aloni in the future. Thank you, Annie, and together with Together Bay Area for your work here and the good work that you do to keep these stories represented here in the Bay Area. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure and honor. Thank you all.
Thank
and
you.
We'll conclude the recording now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Stay safe.